Welcome to the Triskelion, the Purica podcast, where it's all about nature, science, you. The immunity-stress connection is absolutely essential to Purica, and of course, it's a big part of the vision of Jason Watkin, the co-founder, chief executive officer, and chief formulator for Purica for 21 years and counting. I mean, first of all, Jason, can you believe it's been more than 20 years now? You guys are in your 21st, on your way to your 22nd year. You and your brother, Trevor, boy, has it ever come a long way since back in the day.
Yeah, it's unbelievable because I still feel like I'm 15 in my head sometimes.
you and me both. So this will be a podcast between two teenagers in their prime. Hey, one of the things that you've always emphasized is the connection between stress and immunity. The more you're able to manage and mitigate stress, to stay in that balance, the better and more optimized your immunity will be. I mean, that's been something that you've been operating on the premise of really since the beginning, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, way back in the day when I was studying pathophysiology, pharmacology, all the medical sciences, and then working with the dancers, developing recovery in Europe, that was all science, but there was a significant amount of stress in the professional ballets, the dancers that I was working with there. And so stress was always there. I had a lot of stress because I was very competitive against my own self, but also mentally. So I didn't sleep a lot, hardly at all, actually, with insomnia. And I always wanted to do really well. So I understood stress. And it wasn't until probably in the last 20 years when I sort of shifted out of the medical sciences into, comparative religion, philosophy, and then in the Indo-Tibetan side, that I really started focusing on the mind. And that's where I started incorporating, the mind-body connection a lot more in the presentations that I was doing. So, yeah, we focused right since the beginning. I feel like now I've got more to say on it from different angles. I think everybody's got a different way of approaching stress. So, wow, stress is a big inhibitor of your immune system.
And when you talk about that immune system, I mean, one of the other things that you've been emphasizing, especially in recent years, has been the three phases of immunity. It's not really just this monolithic immune system. There's really three phases to it. Could you just map out what the three phases are, and then maybe we'll tackle them one by one?
Yeah, because like you said, it's interesting. Most people think of your immune system has to do with what the medical establishment has basically taught with vaccines and things, is to do with your antibodies, which is the last part of your immune system, the adaptive immune system. So the immune system, ideally, when I was in microbiology back in the 80s, my teacher said your ideal immune system is to keep things out of your body in the first place. And so that's where it gets interesting, because we can talk about that later, but there's actually two phases of your immunity, but the first one is broken into two because it's actually quite different functioning. So that's where the three phases come from. And that's what I'd like to talk about. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are talking about it at all. They're really focusing on, disinfect, which is great. I mean, you can only do so much, though. Like my microbiology teacher again taught me, there'll be those of you that come out of this course that are afraid of everything and try to clean everything and try to keep it all pristine. And then there's those of you who say, well, they're everywhere. The best that I can do is try to improve my response to microbes that are all over the place. So the three phases are, your best phase, keep it out, would be the skin, mucous membrane, because they come in contact with the outside environment. And that's called your barrier immunity. So I'd like to go more on that in a few minutes. And the second phase is your innate, what you're born with, inborn. So you've got it, you're born with it. It's non-specific. It'll fight off anything that comes in, right? And that's like mast cells and dendritic cells and natural killer cells. Anyway, there's lots of different things that go on here. And then the third one is the adaptive response. And that's the one that most people think of as their immune system. And it's very, very complex, all three of those. The last phase is your B and T cells. So the B cells are producing your antibodies. So a lot of people don't even know about the T cells. That's involved in things like immune suppression and stuff like that, for instance, things like AIDS. So anyways, we got different facets of the immune system. and they're all interdependent, and all of them, with a lot of research, are tied into stress levels, diet, exercise, things like that. Your age, your genetics, they all have parts in it.
We're talking to Jason Watkin here on this episode of the Triskelion, the Purica podcast, talking about the 3 phases of immunity. Now, Jason, that you've got me hooked in terms of this being both more complicated than I think a lot of people think, but also simpler than a lot of people think in a lot of ways. And let's begin with the barrier immunity, because as you say, and I know that you, Tanya Ritko, others in the team at Purica have talked about sometimes using the castle analogy where, it's a fortress. You've even got a moat there. That's a pretty good way of looking at the barrier, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so if you thought of that, the barrier as your skin is like the walls. And so they're keeping things out. If you're inside the castle and that's your body, and you've got everything going on in there, people involved in baking, people involved in event planning, people that are resting and teaching you how to sleep or dancing, having fun, all that stuff's going on in the castle. Then there's your defenses. And the best defense, again, is to keep the invaders, anybody who's going to do harm, out of your body in the first place. So that's the skin. A healthy skin, and that requires low stress levels to keep your skin healthy. Anybody who's stayed up too late, past their normal bedtime, they'll even see their pores open, their skin changes, they don't look as vibrant. So again, stress is tied into your skin and the healthier walls. The moat would be all the mucous membrane. So in your nasal cavity, the oral cavity, all the way from the mouth right down to the rectum, the whole digestive tract. If you think of the inside of that digestive tract as simply a tube that runs through you, the moat lines that tube and keeps things from inside that tube from getting in. So think of your digestive tract like a garden hose. The inside of the hose is continuous with the outside environment, the air, if you take the water out. And there might be microbes and different things living inside there, and that in your body, you have a mucous membrane to keep the things that are living in there from getting in. And that's where it gets interesting, because that's called, things that live in there are called your microbiome. And there's more microbial cells in your body living with you than there are the trillions of cells in your whole body. So they're communicating with you all the time. They're affecting your immune system. They're affecting the cravings for different types of foods. They're affecting your moods. Like when you say, I feel something in the gut too, they're affecting how you deal with stress. And it becomes habituated. So those microbes that live in there play a huge role in how you function as a person. Everyone has different strains living according to their diet, that they were born with, their environment, their stress levels, everything like that. So if you think of the mucous membranes like a moat around your castle, and think of all those different microbes like crocodiles and things in that moat, that a lot of them are benefiting you, keeping other potentially invasive things out. But some of them are not so beneficial, and that's where really, diet, exercise, helping to maintain low stress or change in the way you deal with stress is going to affect the microbiome, all those microbes are going to change, and the health of your mucosal layer, which is produced from the underlying, they're called epithelial cells. So everything's tied together, and including fitness. When you're fit, when you eat well, that's affecting your entire barrier immunity, all your skin and your mucous membrane.
I mean, it's complicated, but it's also so simple in the sense that the healthier you are, the more you're opening and closing your pores through exercise, sweating some of the toxins out, the better that barrier will work, right?
Absolutely. And there again, anybody who knows that when you're active, you feel better after you've done some physical activity, even if it's just that you're really tired and all the excessive thoughts. When you're so tired after a hard day's work, you feel like sitting down, you don't have so many thoughts. You're more in that parasympathetic, relaxed, it's called hypothalamus pituitary thyroid or HPT axis. You're really in that kind of zone. You're relaxed. You don't necessarily realize that because you just feel tired, but that's helping your body adapt and increasing your circulation, increasing your lymphatic flow, which the lymph system is full of different immune cells. So increasing the lymph flow is helping you to get rid of a lot of things via your immune system that you don't want in your body. So physical fitness is huge, but also diet. If you're eating a lot of different things that you shouldn't, or your immune system is reacting to, or things that you're allergic to that you're kind of addicted to, that's creating almost like a phlegmy, mucousy situation inside your body, which is inhibiting the flow, which is inhibiting your immune system's ability to do its job. And obviously that's not a good thing. So many things are tied together. But in reality, a lot of them, like you said earlier, they're pretty simple, right? Because a lot of us know what we think we should be doing that would probably be better, or things that we do that we think, you know what, that doesn't seem that great for me. That food doesn't seem to sit well with me. Even if it's healthy for other people, I don't feel well when I eat it. Those are the kind of things that we need to start looking at to see, can we adjust those? And a lot of times if we just pay attention better, we can see for ourselves. We don't need to go to a lot of doctors and things. We can see for ourselves when we're doing things that affect us positively or negatively. And again, stress. Anybody knows when they're stressed, that they typically might get sick, or they don't feel good, or they react in different ways they don't like. They don't sleep well. They overthink. They get irritated thoughts, worried thoughts. So a lot of things are tied together, but they are, like you said, really simple. And my microbiology teacher, going back to him again, because I thought it was great what he said, if we could keep that barrier immunity strong as possible, so low stress, good diet, good exercise, different supplements that encourage the health of the mucosal tract or the moat, that is the best possible thing you could do to keep from getting sick. And I'm not talking about just viruses and bacteria and fungi and things like that. I'm talking about other sicknesses as well. It's a simple thing.
I mean, you talk about that. It really sounds like it's our foundation. The barrier immunity, the stronger that is, the more optimal the rest of the system is. And that's what we're going to do next. Keep it here on the Triskelion, the Purica podcast. We're just 30 seconds away from moving from barrier immunity to innate immunity and more, talking about the 3 phases of immunity with Jason Watkin, CEO, co-founder, and chief formulator of Purica. You're in the Natural Health Zone with the Triskelion, the Purica podcast. Tom Manek, along with Jason Watkin, the co-founder, chief executive officer, and chief formulator for Purica, talking the 3 phases of immunity. And Jason, just before we make the segue from barrier immunity to innate immunity and, of course, adaptive immunity, and we'll go from there. But, you were just teasing, not only me, but teasing our listeners on raising the issue of the microbiome, because one of the things that I know that you and Purica are so excited about is the imminent launch of Purica Probiotic, because those are those soldiers, right? Those are those living organisms that help keep your barrier strong.
Absolutely. And there's keys to that. Is decades ago, when I was first interested in probiotics and the research that was ongoing in that, is that a lot of what's out there right now, and has been for a long time, are animal strains from cows and different things. Whereas the ideal strains would come from, say, a culture where they're not exposed to a bunch of different chemicals or antibiotics or vaccine, more of a kind of ancient, more primitive way of living, but also human strains. And so that's what we're releasing. Also, the more is better thing, it's become a really tricky issue. I mean, we're always trying to say more of this is better. If you find something that's healthy, more of it's better. If you find something that makes, even on the other scene, entertainment, more is better. And that we know that there's an issue with that. And the Zen idea principles in the Tibetan, the Mahamudra, they're more about simplicity. Simplicity is low stress. Simplicity is clear. It's like if you have water and you're stirring it up and it's all complex, you can't see through it properly. But if you can relax, the water becomes still, the dirt settles, and you can see through the water. It's kind of like your mind and your body. If you can try to simplify, even in your diet, and also with the amount of organisms that you're taking in as a probiotic. So we're looking at strains that have a lot of research on them. They're specific for certain things, and they're targeted, and they're really strong, and they can influence the entire health of your overall digestive tract. And so that's what we did, is we partnered with a large Japanese company, Kaneka, and they purchased another company. And the research on it, these unique strains, they're human strains, they're taken from ancient primitive type of cultures, and that's going to reinforce, like you said, the microbiome, which is tied directly into our immune system functioning, our moods, our cravings, everything else. And here's an interesting little point, is that we even have compounds that our digestive tract cells and other cells, but mostly digestive tract cells, produce, called defensins, which kind of act like farmers or signals to communicate with that microbiome. And that's just like really serious, exciting science that could replace even things like vaccines if you could work with these compounds, these defensins. But it also shows you that these defensins are associated with many different functions in your body, and they are direct communicators with that microbiome, which is tied to us directly and has been since the dawn of time kind of idea. So we're starting to launch that to make sure that we have those available. And the other side of that barrier immunity we just talked about, just your digestive enzyme output or your hydrochloric acid, stomach acid output, those things are degrading things that you swallow as well. So if you have a weak digestive tract, weak hydrochloric acid output, weak digestive enzyme output, you're increasing your likelihood of absorbing compounds, viral compounds, microbial compounds, foodstuffs that get into your blood past the moat, and then you start reacting to them. So all these things, again, are tied. But again, if people could just look at ways for themselves about helping them deal with stress, whether it just be going out in nature, Tai Chi, meditation, yoga, or taking a warm bath and trying to let go of thoughts in your mind, even a few minutes a day will start to alter even your microbiome and the way that your entire body functions. It's all a habit of getting into a new habit, of getting out of that stress mode and into that non-stress, healing, strong immunity mode.
Tom Manek along with Jason Watkin. Of course, there you have it. Of course, this week's announcement that Purica Probiotic, a partnership between Purica and Kaneka, one of the global leaders in probiotics. We're going to have to devote an entire podcast to that, and we'll do that the next chance we can get ourselves together. But let's move past the barrier immunity, Jason, into the innate immunity. And you said it off the top of this edition of the Triskelion, the Purica podcast, that it's literally aspects of your immunity that you're born with.
Yeah, and that's key, right? I mean, once things get past the barrier, or even in the barrier, some of this, because the innate immune system encompasses the barrier, but like I said, we separated it out for sake of simplicity and talking about that unique function. But some of these innate cells are present in the mucosal membranes. And what they do is they basically engulf anything, kind of like that game Pac-Man.
Yeah.
So from way back. Right?
Old
so
school.
Old school Pac-Man, just simple. So they're getting in your body, or they're even inside the digestive tract. And if that non-specific, in other words, they just basically attack anything foreign, even large foodstuffs that shouldn't be in your blood because you didn't digest them properly. Well, they engulf them, or they release reactive oxygen species like free radicals or inflammatory compounds, and they destroy it. Or this is kind of cool, natural killer cells, which are part of your innate defense, you're born with it. They're kind of like that movie, for those of you that are as old as me, Road Warrior, where they kind of look like they're wearing parts of things that they've conquered outside their body. Well, that's what natural killer cells do. They'll engulf and annihilate some foreign invader, and they'll wear parts of it on the outside of themselves. So they start to look like these, freaky kind of Road Warrior kind of idea, but they're really powerful cells. And your lymph system throughout your body, which is kind of like another blood system, it uses, instead of the heart to pump, it uses muscular activity. So sometimes when people are in the hospital for a long time, they're laying for a long time, they get bed sores because their lymph is not pumping anymore. That's why I have to keep them moving a bit to get the muscle action. Physical fitness helps your lymph go. And that's like a customs lineup. So say you're going through the airport and they take certain people out of the lineup and go through another line to check things that look suspicious, to check people that look suspicious, and to look through your luggage. That's what your lymph system is. It's taking things out of the bloodstream and it's checking them. And then if it finds something that is foreign or problematic, it targets it. And so it needs to keep going, and it drains from the upper part of your body. So again, sometimes even lymphatic massage from the lower part of your body, moving upwards towards your shoulders. That's how you do it. You don't massage downward towards your feet. Otherwise, you're actually pushing the lymph back down. And another thing is if people get swollen ankles and things like that, that indicates lymph is not draining properly. So that's, again, just massage backwards or laying with your feet up is going to help the lymph drain. That helps your immune system because that keeps it flowing and it keeps that customs line up clean. So that is key. It also, the innate defense, if, say, a virus got in, then it can signal the hypothalamus to increase your body temperature, which is something we think of as fever. So fever is very effective when it stays within a proper temperature range at basically denaturing or breaking up the virus so that it can't have any activity and it can't replicate itself. So again, these are things that are in there, and it causes inflammation and walls off things that get in so they don't get further in your blood. So that's part of your innate defense. And again, it's nonspecific. It just goes after everything. So if something gets past your barrier immunity, your skin, your mucosal membranes, your digestive enzymes, your hydrochloric acid, these defense compounds, your microbiome, which is also working with you, if it gets past that and it gets past all these different cells I'm talking about, natural killer cells, the mast cells, basophils, eosinophils, then it gets into your adaptive response, which that's already active, but this is the area that people hear about when they hear about immunity. And that's that next phase, the adaptive phase.
And let's go there, because I think we've got a really good feel for the barrier, the innate, that work together as that first line of defense. But really, it's the adaptive side of things that so many people view as the entire immunity system. But what do you think is most important for members of Purica Nation, for the Purica family, to know about adaptive immunity?
So adaptive immunity, you're not born with it. So it's something, when you're exposed to things, over time, you develop and adapt to your environment. That's why it's adaptive. That's why I say, farmers' kids. Farmers' kids are they're basically exposed to tons of different microbes in maybe smaller levels. It allows their immune system to start to adapt to different microbes, different fungi, different bacteria, different virus, things like that. So sometimes there is that kind of thing that farmers' children can have a stronger immunity, or people that don't necessarily get really freaked out about viruses and they think, I can expose myself to minute levels, right? I'm not talking about getting right in somebody that is really sick right in front of them, because that could be such a massive level you're exposed to. But once your system is exposed to these microbes, that innate level of defense, it picks up some of these compounds, it's breaking different things up, and it will expose the two key cells of your adaptive response. And there's different subtypes of them, are your T cells, which coordinate the B cells, but they also have cytotoxic or cell-killing activity. Sometimes on both the innate and adaptive, if a cell gets infected, say by a virus or something else, or cancer, both in your adaptive and in your innate defenses, there's cytotoxic activity where your own immune system figures out that certain cells have been infected, and they'll actually wipe out the cells that are infected of your own body, which obviously you don't want too much of that happening all the time. Otherwise, it causes a lot of inflammation. But the B and T cells are presented over time with different things that are getting in your body, and their job is basically to form a memory type immunity so that once you're exposed next time. So they're not ideal when you're first exposed, because they have a long time before they have activity. They're figuring things out. They're wondering you know what I mean? They're trying to, how do I do this? How do I make this? And it could take 10 days or more to form immunity from those. Once you have it, once you're re-exposed, then your body quickly will get signaled by the T cells and the B cells to form the B cells forming antibodies. And then those antibodies, they basically act like it's called opsonization, or they'll bind up around, say, a virus particle or a microbe, and they'll either completely block it so it can't bind up and replicate itself, or it will mark it for other cells that will come in and then break it up and attack it or engulf it. So basically, the activity of the antibodies is produced to act like a blanket that you throw around something so that it's recognized more easily. But again, that's slow acting. Once it gets active, it's very, very powerful at getting rid of things, but it does take time. So your ideal immunity on first exposure to anything is not your adaptive response. That's for the next time to form immunity. Your ideal response still is your barrier immunity, your innate immunity, and then if those ones are doing a good job, they're either annihilating it itself or they're slowing it up enough that it gives the adaptive response enough time to launch a defense and to form the memory immunity. So again, these are all working together, but the one that we think of the most is the one that's actually the slowest acting. And that's also the one that the vaccines are active on, is forming that. And another thing that happens is with this adaptive response, why sometimes you'll have to get booster shots or keep getting reshots, like with the flu, is that viruses, many of them, are mutating constantly because they don't have defense mechanisms. They don't have genetic repair mechanisms like healthy human cells. So like a cancer cell, a virus can't repair itself very easily. That's how they're susceptible. But in doing that, they're changing their makeup. And so the immunity that you may have developed for this memory next time no longer works because the virus has shifted. So it's like I said, it's very complicated. But again, if you're keeping those innate responses, your barrier and innate strong, and you're focusing on your health and trying not to do things that you know cause mucus, phlegm, you feel slow, you feel depressed, you overthink. If you're trying to deal with that and trying to incorporate healthier choices, a lot of times, by the way, healthier choices are not necessarily you have to take a whole bunch of new things. A lot of times it's actually simply not doing certain things that we're doing right now. And like I said, we all know what they are, that suppress your immunity by causing stress. And many things cause stress now, including being on devices too much. They're hyper-stimulating. They're putting you in, it's called HPA or sympathetic mode. We're always kind of in a mild fight or flight, hyper-alert state. And that's actually suppressing your immune system very powerfully. So finding ways to get out of that, finding times to get off your devices, especially at night, then you get a good sleep, helps to repair, rebuild, and that kind of thing. Anyways, these three parts of the immune system are really tied together. And the best things you can do is to control stress. And, you do a lot of things too, Tom, I know. To start stress, right?
Well, it's interesting because I'm listening to you talk about adaptive immunity, and I'm having flashbacks to being 5.5 years old, living on the West Island, Montreal, on a place called Mario Street, and was in the yard of one of my best buddies back in the day. His name was Michael. His mom's name was Grace O'Neill, and to this day, I remember her saying something along the lines of, don't be too clean because you want to build up your immunity system. And, it sort of was counterintuitive for me. I was just, 5.5 years old. Like my adaptive immunity, I was just figuring out the world around me kind of thing. But, if you're a bubble boy for the first 10 to 15 years of your life and you don't develop the adaptive, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into this world of pathogens and antigens, that is a lot more problematic than sort of building up that adaptive immunity over time, isn't it?
Big time. And you just brought up something that's kind of interesting. That movie, was it Bubble Boy, remember? Remember that movie a long time ago?
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Right?
Yep.
So that's the aseptic, or basically you're inhibiting the life of anything else forming. And that is tied to the microbiome as well. So not only are you not getting exposed to things that strengthen your immune system, you're also inhibiting the formation of your microbiome, which is not only about your immune system, it's about mental functioning, it's about blood sugar control, it's about cravings, mood, everything. So by basically sticking yourself in a bubble and trying to eliminate everything that way, which is fine, you can do as best you can, keep things clean, that is great. But you're also inhibiting the formation of that proper microbiome. So like I said, it's not only just about the immune system. A strong immune system usually indicates a low stress type of way of dealing with life. And sometimes people say, well, that guy's totally stressed and he never gets sick. Yes, if you're so stressed all the time and you never get sick, think of all the people in your life, especially if we're getting older, that you'll think never got sick, was always healthy. Then they end up with cancer or heart disease, something more severe. That's because their immune system, in many cases, was not even functional. not even enough to give the symptoms of a cold or flu or other things, which are typically from your immune system's attack against that. The inflammation, the runny nose, the fever, that's your immune system's response to an invader. If you can't even mount an attack, things are going deeper and deeper and deeper, and they can affect things in a more profound way that then later you end up with irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, colitis, autoimmune disease, cancer, any of these different things. When you think, how did that person get it? They never got sick, and that's often why. So people shouldn't get so, arrogant sometimes thinking I never get sick, because actually that could mean in some cases it's because they're stressed all the time and they're inhibiting their immune system. They're not actually strong. It's actually a weakened defense.
We've got Jason Watkin for another 2 or 3 minutes here on this overview of the 3 phases of immunity. Of course, we've covered off, Jason, the barrier and innate immunity. We've covered off the adaptive immunity. We've got another, just a few minutes here to chat on this episode of the Triskelion. What do we need to know about the final phase of immunity?
So that's that final. The adaptive phase is something that you definitely want to incorporate, but hopefully the other 2, or the innate in its split of the barrier, the mucosal membranes, the digestive enzyme output, the healthy digestive system, healthy lungs, healthy genitourinary tract, healthy skin, healthy mucosal layer on the eyes, all those things are doing their job in keeping things out or slowing the release into your bloodstream of those things to give that adaptive response a chance to not get overwhelmed so it can start to form its memory. And like I said, in not all cases, memory is going to mean much if the virus is mutating or whatever is mutating all the time. But in many cases, it needs time, and it needs that basically the cavalry, the people that are slowing down the invaders enough that they can figure it out for next time, figure out strategies of how it infects, how it gets in. So basically, a lot of what you're doing is improving the other frontal lines of defense, which will then improve your adaptive defenses. So I'd say, again, keeping a low stress, and a lot of times diet and exercise are tied into stress. But for a lot of people today, because of devices and technology, I think it calls for stronger things, like the additions of adaptogens like the mushrooms, ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng, things like that. Also, looking at something that gets your mind and body out of that constant thinking, getting stressed about stuff, which the East is far ahead of the West. And it's coming to us like with things like yoga and meditation, or even appreciating the present moment, just being right here, right now. That's very difficult for a lot of us. So those kind of techniques, anything you can do, even looking at a picture of nature on your computer, is something that can help slow down that excessive thinking and stuff like that. So I think this is how they're all tied.
Just listening to you there, Jason, pretty therapeutic stuff. Really appreciate it. We're going to reconvene as soon as we possibly can to give a full discussion on Purica Probiotic and why probiotics are becoming as, if not more important than antibiotics, and of course just a differentiation there. But thank you so much for walking us through these 3 phases of immunity. Can't wait to convene with you again here in the Triskelion.
Sounds great, Tom.
That's Jason Watkin, the co-founder, chief executive officer, and chief formulator for Purica. You've been listening to the Triskelion, the Purica podcast. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Purica Wellness, and sign up for our e-newsletter at purica.com.